Hi, welcome to Dominator TV episode 8, where we're going to talk about the appraisal. Now you might notice that I'm in a different place other than my studio. I'm actually here in Bakersville, North Carolina on a suspension bridge because the appraisal sort of leaves a lot of people kind of up in the air, just like we are on this crazy ass bridge. It leaves people up in the air and they need to know how to get through it. Stay tuned, we'll go over it.
Much like the crazy bridge, the appraisal process can leave buyers on edge. Let's clear up that cloudiness and set the course for homeownership. A real estate appraisal is defined as follows: the act of having an expert, a licensed appraiser, assess the value to assess a property to determine its true value. The appraisal is one of the biggest fail-safe switches in a sale, as it is this point where you know for certainty what the property is worth. We can do comparable estimates all day long, and while we may be close, the appraisal is the final step in determining what your actual property's value is.
Now, when it comes to appraisals, you really want to weigh your risks. Obviously, you don't want to buy something if you can't make sure that it's insured for the right value that you're going in at. So let's talk about weighing risks. We're about to drive across this bridge, and we're going to do a quick look back after we're finished.
Stop this bridge.
I'll let you know how it goes. Here, just
steady.
hold on to that, please. I want somebody to record our death. Oh, that was pleasant. This is a clip of the bridge that we decided to drive over, and you can see Keith jumping on it while it shakes. And this loose board right here, this is totally crazy. That was dumb.
In cases where a lender is uninvolved, the appraisal is optional, yet still a great idea to have performed to ensure that you don't overpay for a property. In most any transaction that involves financing, an appraisal will be required by the financial institution. This means that your financer wants to make sure they're lending the appropriate amount of money on the property before they obligate. This protects them from losing value if they have to foreclose on the property. So let's say they didn't have an appraisal and they lend $150,000 for a house and foreclose on it within 6 months. After foreclosure, they attempt to sell the property to make their money back, but they're only able to get $130,000. This means that the financer has lost $20,000 plus whatever money they incurred during this transaction. Had they had an appraisal, they could have minimized their risk of loss. At the end of the day, it is not the financer's goal to lose you money or to lose their money. Once we arrive at the appraisal step, the realtor and finance company will instruct you to order and pay for the appraisal. They're usually under $600 for standard single-family residences, but can vary depending on situation, company, and area. In most cases, the buyer pays out of pocket for the appraisal. In some rare cases, the lender will pay for it as part of the financing expenses and then ask to be reimbursed in the event the sale falls through. It's important to ask your lender who pays up front. Once you pay for the appraisal, the lender will hire an appraisal management company to send a licensed appraiser to the property to perform their evaluation. They're not only performing a value analysis, but they're making sure the property meets any safety or livability requirements that the particular loan type requires. For example, a conventional mortgage would follow the guidelines set by the lender, where a government-insured mortgage like FHA would follow FHA guidelines. In most cases, the property's condition guidelines are in place to ensure the property is safe to inhabit, has a reliable heat source, and can retain its value. After the appraiser performs their evaluation, they will create a report and send it to the lender. The process usually takes 1 to 2 weeks from start to finish, depending on the appraisal management company's workload. When the report arrives, the buyer will be notified first of the value that the home appraised for, and secondly of any repairs that need to be made prior to final approval. Most real estate agreements are written contingent upon the appraised value equaling or exceeding the agreed upon purchase price. In the event that the property appraises for less, the buyer and seller have the opportunity to renegotiate who will be coming up with the additional value, as the lender will likely not want to lend any more money than the property is worth. This is why it's incredibly important to have an agent who understands housing values when the offer is written. If the buyer and the seller cannot come to an agreement, they may terminate the sale and move on. A similar, yet much less stressful process will begin in the event the appraisal report requires repairs to be completed prior to closing. If this is the case, the buyer will usually ask the seller to have repairs completed. In some rare cases, the seller may refuse and the buyer may choose to have the repairs completed at their own expense. Similarly to the value clause, failure to come to an agreement on these repairs will also allow the buyer and seller to terminate the purchase and move forward. Here are a few common repairs required on government-insured mortgages. Peeling or chipping paint to be sanded and repainted. Loose handrails to be reinforced. Safety or tripping hazards to be repaired in the floor. Repairs to the HVAC to be made or other permanent heating sources. In some cases, when you have a mobile home that has a permanent foundation or an underpinning, they will make sure that the stucco applied to these blocks is reinforced with fiberglass, and they may ask repairs to be made regarding that and steel tethering to the ground. If any repairs have been required, the appraiser will need to do a follow-up visit to ensure they have been completed prior to closing. This usually costs $100 to $200 depending on the appraiser. The frequency of bad values or repairs needed is much more rare than you may think, as many sales receive reports back that show good value and no repairs required. If the agents do a good job of identifying issues before the appraisal and making sure the value is right, lots of these hurdles can be crossed up front. In the event the buyer and seller choose to terminate the agreement at the appraisal stage, the buyer will not receive any reimbursement for appraisal fees or inspection fees. It is likely, however, that the buyer's earnest money will be refunded to them as they acted in good faith and exhausted the proper contingencies to terminate the sale. Aside from picking the brain of an appraiser in person, a task that I've taken to at every opportunity, that is about the max of information you need to know going into it. The bottom line is that all appraisers are different, and different loan types and companies have different requirements. As always, remember that this purchase belongs to you, and you deserve the right to make it right the first time. Until next time, this has been Dominator TV. Peace out.
I bridge swing!